All right, well, here we are. Welcome to the year 2015. We've been doing this little podcast here now for about a year. This is episode number 45 of the Oklahoma Weather Show. Again, the first episode of 2015. A lot to talk about, certainly, as we head into the new year and look back at what happened in 2014. 2014, not exactly a severe weather year for Oklahoma. Not that I think many of us are complaining, but we do have our very own Greg Carbin from the Storm Prediction Center. He's going to be talking to us today about some interesting stats here in Oklahoma and as well across the United States and whatever else he wants to talk about. We actually had to do this show one day early today because Greg, you're going to kind of head out of Oklahoma for a little bit. You were telling us a little while ago, but just to kind of make people jealous at home, where are you headed tomorrow?
Headed out to Reno and Lake Tahoe. There's a conference going on out there, about 25 TV meteorologists from across the country. And we're going to be going over a severe weather case. It's going to be about a 90-minute workshop where they get a chance to forecast a tornado outbreak.
Any days in particular, events in particular that you guys are going to forecast?
I can't give that away. That's keep that until the very end.
Oh man, so this is like a pop quiz. Like you're coming in the weather class, and the professor says, "Hey, you got a pop quiz today." So you're going to be that teacher, huh?
There'll be maps to analyze. I got the maps printed out, and I don't think anybody's going to guess it. I would be very surprised actually if anybody knows the date.
Oh man, there's a little teaser. There's a little teaser. Well, I'll be anxious to see how this one turns out. Hey, we'll just go on down the line. Brad, good to see you again. It's been a little while. How are things going?
Hey, yeah, good to see you guys too. You know, just hanging out at the house today with the little girl that's sick. Yeah, everything seems to be going pretty well. We are, starting off a new year quite cold, man. This week is just going to be absolutely frigid. Damon, you were saying climatologically this is the coldest week on average. Is that what you saw?
Yeah, if you look at the average temperature for Oklahoma City, actually the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, our average temperature, I believe, is about 38.7 degrees. It starts that slow climb here on out. But December was so mild here in Oklahoma that actually my dog, who is a German Shepherd and a mix of probably some type of Arctic breed, he blew his coat, which if you have a dog that is blowing their coat in December, you know that their body's a little
What does that mean to blow a coat?
Huh?
What does that mean?
He shed. He shed.
Oh, okay.
And he shouldn't be shedding, not in December. So that was pretty interesting. It is. Greg, do you have any dogs?
No, we used to. I say your dog's going to regret that in about a day.
Yeah, he really will. He's now curled up and looks like a fox on the couch right now. He's got his tail over his nose. I think he's trying to stay warm. But yeah, so Jonathan, how's it going, man?
Good. I'd say a lot of people are getting over the sickness. I've been playing daddy daycare. My wife has had the flu, so it's been taking care of her and trying to keep everyone healthy. But with respect to, we were talking, Damon asked me to talk about hate mail. And this last week in Oklahoma, this last Friday, we had a big weather event that turned out to be not so big, and it was that dreaded. Okay, here we go. We know we have moisture coming in, and the Arctic air moved in. Are the two going to gel, and are we going to have ice? And so, unfortunately, a really hard forecast. And I'll be honest with people, I'm going to err on the side of caution, because there have been times where the models, I think, from what I can tell, in my experience, a lot of times they underestimate the strength of the Arctic air. So they're going to bring in the moisture, and they're going to bring in all this rain. And one event that I really remember that I worked through was December 10th. It was a Monday morning, 2007, and it was a wicked ice storm. I mean, we had over an inch of ice. I don't think it was well forecasted, because I don't think the freezing rain warnings, the ice storm warnings were issued till last minute, and then we had thunderstorms embedded in it, and that was a nightmare for me. And so I'm like, all right, next time I ever see an ice storm event, I'm going to err on the side of caution. So Damon, asked me the hate mail that I got, and I think this day and age, a lot of people, I don't get as maybe people are just nice, but it seems like instead of getting it in a written letter, which they used to do about 10 years ago, and instead of typing out an email, which has maybe been last 5 years, a lot of it's on social media. And so if people want to waste 10, 20, 30 minutes, go to our KOCO First Alert weather page, scroll down a little bit to January 2nd, and I asked this question, and this is what I'm getting to talking about hate mail. I put it out there. So which would you rather have? Forecast ice and it rains, or forecast rain and it ices? When it comes to the risk of potential ice, I'd much rather err on the side of caution a few days out than have everyone get caught by surprise with an ice storm. And I said, hope you're staying dry and warm with your loved ones. Have a happy Friday night. Happy New Year's, blah, blah, blah. And there was a mix, but I would say the majority of the feedback, what people said, number one, err on the side of caution, better to do that. Number two, keep up the great work. And a lot of people defended our forecast. And there's literally about 172 comments. So there's tons, and there is a mix. Some people said, I prefer a more accurate forecast. Some people said, some people complain that I took the day off and I didn't get paid today and blah, 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 and now I don't have a paycheck for today. Then other people jumped in there and said, well, that's your own fault.
Yeah.
You got to drive through it. You got to live with it. So instead of me going over every single one, there's 200 of them. I can't read them all, but it's a pretty good read. And but overall, I think this last system, people, if you're honest with people, just be honest. And that happened with the snowstorm. This surprise snow we had on a Sunday. Was it a Sunday morning or I forget? Saturday morning. I put it out there and I said, folks, totally busted the forecast. My fault. Thought it was going to be rain, and it snowed. And people love that. So I didn't get a lot of hate mail.
That's good. That's good. I still seem to get hate mail every now and then, even for doing something as simple. Hey, Greg, I gotta ask you, do y'all ever get hate mail the way that the Weather Service gets hate mail down at SPC?
No, we got a regular. Some of the feedback email from some folks in the country, you see this return. There's a few folks that just return to beat on us constantly. It's mostly on the good side. The overwhelming majority of email that we get is very positive, and not too difficult to deal with. But there are a few folks with feedback that it's always the same, no matter what you do. Like you say, you could have a really great forecast, they still don't like you. So it goes.
The way it goes.
The key, though, I think, in this line of work, and this is borne out by Nate Silver's book, Signal to the Noise, or Signal in the Noise, I think is the title of it, where he talks about forecasting. And one of the key aspects of forecasting is to be as honest as you can. You have to understand that everyone has a bias approaching the forecast, but honesty is important, and I think that you will benefit greatly by being open about the fact that, hey, some things we're just not going to know ahead of time. Other events we hopefully will have some skill, but it's not a constant, right? And so we have to be open and honest about that.
I think we live in a world where people think that forecasting is 100% accurate, and I always have to say, look, if you think that we're going to have a 100% accurate forecast every single time in this lifetime, you are completely out of your mind. Probably not even in your grandchildren's lifetime. They're not going to have it as well. I mean, it's just not going to ever happen.
We've always been talking about kind of the impact-based situation, too, of even having a correct forecast and not forecasting the impacts like you would expect. I remember back to this past week when Thursday and Friday, kind of an icing event for us. The major event looked like Friday, but Thursday morning turned out, of course, to be the much bigger deal. There were car accidents all over the place. It was a heck of a busy morning. Right. And here's one. I don't know. You guys see that? That's that picture right there went everywhere. Kim Passoff, our reporter at KOCO, took that picture, interviewed the guy. He was a little embarrassed by the fact that he ended up at the power lines, and as some described it, the truck standing on its nose. But roads were ridiculously slick. I-40 was shut down for a number of hours, just jackknife semi after jackknife semi. And this all came with maybe 1/100th of an inch of rain falling in 25 degrees, trucks on fire. And there you can see the glaze right there, very little on the actual road. But Chris Lee said he couldn't travel any more than about 20 miles per hour on I-35 at the maximum speed. So just, you know, we knew there would be some freezing rain, but having to know the impacts of that is almost impossible sometimes.
Really? Yeah, I mean, that's pretty intense. You know, I didn't get anything at my house. My house was completely dry that morning, so I was pretty surprised even
What
when I
time
woke
did you
up.
get up? Because I mean, the roads were fine after you had some solar. You know, they're still overcast, but when you're at 25, 26 degrees and it's cloudy, you get enough solar radiation to melt off that 1/100th of an inch. When it's still dark, that's ice. So that's
Yeah, I'm not a big New Year's Eve type of guy, so I was in bed
yeah.
pretty early, but I think I got up maybe about 8:30, 9
Okay.
o'clock.
By then it was almost dry in many areas. So it was really from 6 a.m. to about 8 a.m. It was horrible.
Interesting, interesting. Shelby, how's it going? Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you. It's going good.
What's happening? People want to pick your brain on anything?
You know, had a couple of funny ones, got some picked out for you from your good Facebook post. Let's talk about Tracy Lynn. She says, why does winter make your skin so dry? Well, us being meteorologists, we just automatically say, oh yeah, cold air has less moisture in it than warm air. But if you kind of look into it a little bit, you remember your heater makes your home drier, and the wind can dry out your skin. And the one that kind of surprised me, I haven't really ever thought about it, but you're cold, so you take a hotter shower, and that actually dries your skin out as well. So you can.
That's true. I actually turned up the little nozzle on my hot water heater the other day. The missus was saying it was too cold.
Well, now she's going to have dry skin.
I know, and now my heater bill is going to go up too.
Yeah, I will. Another one I thought might be interesting, since we have Dr. Carbin. Robert Crawford wanted to know if we thought flying drones into tornado supercells would work out.
Ooh.
Interesting.
Greg?
What does work out? I mean, I suppose, you know, yeah, it'll work out for a while, I suppose. I had a good friend, actually, who purchased a drone last year and was flying it and actually lost it in high wind. You know, most of the drones now that are commercially available, they have GPS capability that if they lose the signal to the home base, they're programmed basically to return to the GPS coordinates that they took off from. But that's not going to help you if the drone is basically, you know, demolished or blown out of the sky by high winds. It's going to crash and you're not going to find it, which is most likely what would happen if you flew it into a supercell.
Mm-hmm. Shelby, your brother knows a little something about right?
He doesn't know much about them. My brother got a drone with this brand new GoPro, the whole deal, and it went into the pond about 15 seconds into it. He never got to take a picture with the GoPro, nothing.
Did he ever find it? You said he couldn't find it.
Nope, nowhere.
So there's a drone and a GoPro sitting on the bottom of some pond out here.
Yup. So I'm definitely not the GoPro expert or the drone expert. I thought we should leave that question to y'all.
That is too funny. That is too funny. And also, actually, I'll put in one extra thing here, Shelby. I did a story last night, and I saw that you tweeted out this morning, but with my wife now being at 36 weeks pregnant, we were talking about the difference in pressure and how pressure changes can actually spark a significant increase in childbirths. And went to the doctor's appointment this morning. She's not dilated, but even the doctor said, yes, it is true. When you see a change in pressure, and it doesn't matter whether it's an increase or a decrease in pressure, they have seen a significant increase in delivery. So the next couple of days are going to be interesting because this high pressure that's coming down over the plains for Wednesday, it's one of the higher ones that we've seen in a while, huh, Greg?
Yeah, I actually got a graphic up, guest or a courtesy graphic up on the Weather Underground blog this morning. I Bob Henson, who's now writing for Weather Underground, contacted me yesterday afternoon, and I was looking at some of the historic record as far as pressure over the U.S., and I'd done a couple of maps, and I plotted a map out for him of the December 1983. I can't remember. It was December 24th. Oh, I have it right here. December 24th, 1983, had some of the highest pressure values at the surface measured, certainly within the last 35 years, and in some locations, all-time record high levels of pressure. And so Wednesday, Thursday doesn't quite compare to that, what I would say the granddaddy high pressure system of them all, which is Christmas Eve 1983. But there will probably be some opportunity for record high pressure as we go through the middle of the week. And that, in terms of millibars, which is a measure of the air pressure over your head, I believe the record here in Oklahoma is 1,053 millibars. I'm not sure when that was set, but it looks like there are a few spots that could certainly get close, if not exceed, record high pressure values by the end of the week.
You know, high pressure doesn't really seem to be that fascinating of a term to talk about. Viewers just at home tend to think, well, it's not going to be any different, but it is a pretty cool stat to actually look at, just to see.
It'd be a pretty cold stat.
Yeah, a cold stat too. That is for sure. That is for sure. Well, speaking of stats, you know, if you don't follow Greg on Twitter or on Facebook, then you're probably missing out on all sorts of really interesting weather tidbits that come down. And 2014 was a very interesting year. Lack of severe weather. Greg, I want to talk to you a little bit because you sent out an image a little while ago on. I guess a couple of weeks ago, about the number of tornado watches compared to normal and what have you. Just kind of run through some of these numbers about just how quiet it was this past 2014.
Sure. Yeah, I'm trying to get that map updated today with the statistics through the end of 2014. I kind of jumped ahead a little bit, and we had a couple extra watches down on the Gulf Coast, obviously late December, that aren't included. But much of the nation saw below normal number of watches, and we had, it looks like we're going to be somewhere below, just under 900 tornadoes counted nationwide for 2014. The number won't be finalized probably until somewhere in March, maybe even April, because the Weather Service, any office has 60 days to submit their analysis for each one of their areas. So we still got, you know, another through the end of February before we get December's final count. But my estimate is we'll be right around, maybe a little bit below 900 tornadoes in 2014. 2013 was a little bit just above. I think it was 908 or 907. So 2013 and 14 are going to be very comparable in terms of the total number of tornadoes in the United States. And in 2012 was actually quite low too. I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but it was below what we consider normal. Those past three years, 12, 13, 14, come obviously after 2011, which by all accounts was one of the most extreme and active tornado years on record. So, you know, this is why it's difficult to use the phrase normal when it comes to tornadoes, because they're far from normal. and there's a lot of variability in the counts and the locations that these events take place from year to year. We know that, you know, as you go into the late winter, early spring, there's a ramp up in the potential for tornado activity, especially from the Gulf Coast across parts of the southern United States, and that ramp up can be quite dramatic and occur quite rapidly as we move into April and May, especially across Oklahoma, Kansas, and then the zone of potential migrates slowly northward into the summer months and then retreats back to the south. So not only does the area that it could be potentially impacted by tornado events move or migrate through the year, but the magnitude of those events changes from one year to the next, from 1 month to the next. It is really difficult to quantify tornado activity by using the phrase normal. But that's really all we've got. We'll average out what we've got. And in Oklahoma, it looks like about 16 tornadoes, I think, is what the Norman office has counted through the end of the year. The only other year that comes close to that is 1988, and there were 17 tornadoes according to the Norman Office website in 1988. So it's not like this is unprecedented, but we're certainly at the very, very low end of tornado activity in 2014 across this part of the country.
You know, last year, Greg, we were talking about even the amount of convective available potential energy was pretty low to start. Did we ever see that rebound later in the year?
I'm still working on that. I think that that's one possible reason that you just didn't have the fuel for thunderstorm development as often or as high at high levels that you would expect in the spring. Some of that has to do with temperature. Some of that has to do with moisture. So the big question is, were there deficits in those areas? And it was cooler than normal during the spring across this part of the country. But cool and warm temperatures don't correlate all that well with tornado activity. And instability, or CAPE, as you mentioned, may not correlate all that well either. My feeling on this is anecdotal, but I just have this feeling that if we could somehow talk about general storminess in the large-scale mid-latitude cyclones and their frequency, we would see that the last couple of years have had lower than average levels of activity in terms of the larger scale storm systems that are really needed to bring together the ingredients for tornado outbreaks and tornado events. Those seem to have dropped off just anecdotally. We're not seeing the type of strong cyclones that perhaps we saw and certainly experienced in 2011 and other years that were busy.
This would probably correlate then a lot with California's drought. Due to the track of the jets and the track of the lows that aren't coming south. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think that's in the bigger picture when you look at the large-scale flow regime in place across North America over the past year, and it hasn't changed very much. It's very large anomalous ridge along the western coast of North America, basically shunting any weather systems well to the north of the continent, and then northwest flow to the east of that. So on the eastern flank of this high pressure on the west coast, you have northwest winds in the atmosphere, which actually can favor the development of summertime, MCS complexes off the high terrain, but those winds are not conducive in the spring and early summer to supplying what the mid-level lapse rates you would normally see supportive of more violent weather. So the northwest flow regime in place across the middle of the country not only introduces colder than normal conditions, or cooler, depending on the time of the year, but is less conducive to widespread severe weather, at least in this part of the country.
It's interesting because, I can see a weather setup coming in across Oklahoma and say, this looks pretty big for severe weather. But it was interesting that this past year, 2014, I want to say Denver led the United States in tornado warnings. I felt like there was a pretty good time there where Denver Metro was always having a tornado warning somewhere, but I would look at some of their micro-analysis, and it wasn't the type of weather setups that would favor tornadoes here in Oklahoma.
Right. I mean, they get, of course, with that kind of northwest flow regime in place, and you get the lee side development, you get the Denver cyclone. And as you move into June, it can be the Denver cyclone can be particularly, conducive to daily tornado events there. Right over DIA, they put that airport in the worst possible.
No kidding.
Tornadoes at that airport in the last couple of years, and it's terrain influences out there that play a huge role.
I remember when they were building that airport and they were closing down Stapleton, and they said, "Oh, this airport's supposed to be the most, technical." Can't even say the word. It's to say it was supposed to be. So I'm not going to attempt to say I can't even say the right word. I'm sick today. Technological. There we go. Anyways, they were saying that it was supposed to be that type of airport, and that weather would never slow it down. And then all of a sudden, it has all these tornado warnings.
Never say never.
Yeah, never say never. Well, Greg, big year for you all. You all released the new convective outlooks. How's that coming along?
Well, we've had a few opportunities to go and use both the marginal category, which is the lower probability risk of severe weather, And again, our outlooks are based on the probability. I know that word can be difficult for folks, but basically, looking at the chance of a tornado event or a severe thunderstorm, hail, or wind event within 25 miles of your location. And the reason that we have to sort of spread that chance out across a large area is because these events are low probability to begin with. And so the marginal is the lowest category right now, describing probabilities that are around 5%. Probabilities you don't even worry about when it comes to precipitation, but you may want to be concerned about when it comes to a tornado. A 5% probability is not zero, and certainly pay attention on those days. And then it goes to the traditional slight risk category for probabilities around 10 to 15%. Again, they seem like low numbers, but climatologically, in the month of June, you run in western Oklahoma about a 15% probability every day of seeing a large hail event. So slight risk is actually climatology in parts of western Oklahoma in May, parts of May and June. And then the new category, in addition to marginal, is enhanced, which comes between a slight risk and a moderate risk. And so this is, again, a little bit elevated probability. The reason we introduced the enhanced category is because we were spreading over too large a range of probabilities by just using slight. So we wanted to say, look, our numerical forecasts have better resolution than our categorical or worded forecasts. And so let's add a new category between the slight risk and the moderate risk for those days that, they're not the high-end days, but they're perhaps a little bit more than just what we might be used to in May or June, right? So we're thinking a scattering of severe storm reports. That might be a word you could use to describe an enhanced day. And perhaps a scattering of severe storm reports with a couple of those being rather significant, large hail 2 inches or greater in diameter, or high winds of hurricane force, or maybe an EF2 tornado. And then the moderate risk, which does start to really, ring some bells and raise some flags. At the moderate risk level, you're talking about the forecast potential for relatively widespread severe weather. You can also convey that as meaning that there's more confidence that that event will occur. We were just talking about freezing rain and winter weather forecasting and how difficult it is, and how many of those events are low confidence events. But when you get into the moderate risk category, you're talking about a forecast that has relatively high confidence. We're really thinking there will be storms today. They may not be right at your house, but they may be close to your town, and some of them, a few of them, could pose a significant threat to life and property. And then finally, the high end, the high risk. Some want to call it extreme, but the high risk outlook is really reserved for tornado outbreaks. It's reserved for those events where there's a tremendous amount of confidence that you're going to see damaging to deadly tornado events, and that's the highest end of the scale.
What type of feedback did you all hear? Because you opened up this change in the outlooks, you allowed for public input. What were people saying? People
love change, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, the overall response, though, it was positive. I think that, in fact, I did an evaluation of the numbers coming back from the feedback, and you had your in the minority, there were these opinions that this is just going to confuse people even more. I have to remember that the Storm Prediction Center has traditionally existed for other meteorologists like yourself. I mean, the public products from the Storm Prediction Center in the past really the Watch was the only public product that was out there. The thunderstorm outlooks and these probabilities we talk about are still very much technical meteorological products. You have to have an understanding of what you're looking at in order to make any use out of it. And so we faced a challenge here in the recent decades since the internet, in that now everything is available to anyone. And so the real challenge is, how do you convey these technical discussions to the general public, or even should we be conveying them I honestly feel that some of our most important users are you, the other meteorologists out there. If we can, get across to you what we're trying to convey in these outlooks, we'll be much better off in getting the word out about danger on a particular day. But that's our challenge, is that we have a large number of lay people who are also coming to the website and trying to decipher this stuff.
I think what is interesting now is that we have a word for see text. We would never go on air and say see text.
Right.
But now we do have a word for that, and marginal. So it definitely, it will definitely get pushed out into media. And we had our first marginal day, a couple weeks ago, in which I guess they have called it a tornado. I don't know if it looked like a big funnel cloud.
Pretty marginal tornado.
Yeah, there you go.
Right?
It was a marginal tornado. I like that.
It was isolated too.
Yeah. So, and it's funny because even when I look at these outlooks, I've been watching them and I've been seeing these marginal risk days where nothing happens. And the verification on the marginal, once in a while something will happen, but there will be many marginal risks where nothing happens. That's the point. Is that you're dealing with events that are infrequent and low confidence and not expected to be much of a problem. And so there will be those events where the marginal doesn't have any reports associated with it, and that's the nature of what we're trying to do.
Do you think what's the next change? Is someone already lining up something new that you all want to push out in the next couple of years, or is this it for a while?
Well, I think along the lines of talking about the public's interest in this type of meteorology and better understanding of the risk to life and property, that we are going to continue to fine-tune the watch, the convective and the tornado watch, to better use plain language to better describe the risk. The underlying forecast will still be based on the confidence of the forecaster who's putting in probabilities of a tornado event, probabilities of a hail or a wind event over the area of the watch. Those will be actually decoded or encoded into more plain language descriptions, from things like isolated to scattered to widespread, violent storms. Try to use plain language where we can, but be consistent in the use of that plain language with the probabilities that drive all the forecasts.
That's what we struggle with, obviously, because in the past, I think folks have tried to fill in the holes where now SPC and others are, making that more higher resolution forecast, if you will. So they may have been using a word like the word enhanced differently than how the SPC uses it now. I watched over the weekend, I guess it was James Spann using the outlook exactly as SPC had it. It was encouraging to see it being more adapted. And so I think if everyone kind of adapted the use of the words similarly, then the public would then understand what's what, where enhanced should go.
Well, it's kind of like the enhanced Fujita scale. For a while there, people said, "Oh, it's still the F scale," and now, I mean, there might be one or two people that still say F, but that was a big time change during the time, and now it seems normal.
Yeah, and I think Brad's right on. If we can get consistency in the use of the words, that would be good. If we can, and that's going to be a challenge. Even internally in the Weather Service, that's actually a challenge. You have different offices using different scales and different category descriptions. We still can fall back on, for lack of anything else, we can say, we have a 5-category scheme. And if you want to call it a 1 out of 5 day or a 2 out of 5, the increasing numbers mean increasing risk, and so we can go all the way up to a risk of 5, similar to categories for hurricanes, similar to the enhanced F scale. Damon, you just mentioned. There's still debate as to whether, well, is 5 the worst or is 1 the worst? But most of the time the scale increases 1 through 5, and 5 would be the worst case.
Do we ever get to a point where we use colors instead of numbers?
Well, I think that's another aspect of the communications initiative here. Is it's not just the words, it's not just the probabilities, it's the colors that are used, and it's the levels and icons too. We've heard from social scientists that if you can use icons in your description of risk, that they can be another way of conveying that and communicating it. It's a huge challenge, and there aren't any easy answers. I don't think that there's going to be some silver bullet out there that says this will solve all our problems with respect to risk communication. Probably, the simpler the better is one approach, and but at the same time, we all know meteorology is far from simple, and it's not going to get any easier. It's going to get more complicated. And especially if we introduce the idea of impacts. The Weather Service traditionally is not forecast impacts. It's forecast thresholds, right? We forecast the amount of snow, or we forecast the size of the hail and how many storms there might be. We forecast the tornado events, but we haven't traditionally gotten into the realm of saying, well, this particular event has the potential to wipe out power grid systems over a large area for several days, or flood so many homes, shut down so many roads. Those types of forecasts are even more complex and challenging than the weather risk, just the weather alone.
Yeah. Brad, Jonathan, Shelby?
Yeah, my deal is that I think for the public, back in the day, they never knew who the SPC was, and they never really knew about the outlooks, and I feel like we have this monster that we have to keep on feeding. These people are expecting more. We want more accurate forecasts, more precision, and so I understand the need for it. But if I were to give, just as I'm sure the research has been done, but if we got a group of 100 people together and we threw out the words low, moderate, high, enhanced, marginal, and we asked them to put them in order of severity from low to high, my question is how many would get it right? And then I would ask you, to me it just seems super simple, scale 1 to 5. We're at DEFCON level 5, or whatever you want to call it. People get that. If I took a group of 100 people and said on a scale of 1 to 5, in order, with 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest, put those numbers in order, I would hope the majority of the people would get it right. So to me, I think if all across the board, today is a 4-day, today's a 5-day. But here's my question. I just want to verify for me. The outlook has nothing to do with the severity. It has to do with the amount of storms, correct? Because you can have a huge, on a slight day, you can still have an EF4, EF5 that does tons of damage, but if it's only one, it wouldn't verify as a high risk. Am I correct?
Oh, certainly. But back up a little bit there. We try in the outlooks. We have the enhanced, or the hatched area on the graphic in the probability graphic that depicts those areas with a 10% or greater probability of significant severe weather. And so the significance or the intensity of the storms is conveyed in the Outlook product. Now, it's not necessarily going to be conveyed in the wording, but I will say this: if you're in a moderate or a high risk, significant severe weather is part of that risk. You can't get to those risk categories right now without some forecast of significant severe. So intensity is taken into account in the outlooks. And intensity is related to some extent with F-scale and impacts and damage. Although you could, theoretically, you could have relatively weak tornado produce quite a bit of damage, right? So there are these fuzzy areas, but we do try to understand and convey when we can not just the coverage, but intensity of those events. And we all know, again, part of the issue here, though, is that when you go into that realm of intensity, especially with tornado events, EF4, EF5 tornadoes are extremely rare. It may not seem that way around here, but they are. And we didn't have an EF5 tornado in 2014, the whole year went by without one, thank goodness. So forecasting these things on a daily or hourly basis is just hard to even comprehend when you think about how rare the event is. One other point I wanted to get back to Damon's question about the new ideas. We're going to be working on a shorter term outlook experimentally. I don't think it's going to be going out right now, but we're going to start getting down into shorter timescales. So right now our convective outlooks are essentially a 24-hour forecast. When you're in day one, it goes 18 and then 12 hours in the evening for the rest of the night. We're going to try to start doing tornado probability forecasts with only a 3-hour duration. And so think about that for a minute, because most of the time, even in a 24-hour period, your probability of a tornado is 0. So many of these 3-hour segments, tornado forecasts, will also be 0. But when they're not 0, those probabilities actually could be quite higher than the relative 24-hour span that has probabilities of anywhere from 15 to 25 or 30%. So it's going to be very interesting to move into this realm of what we're calling higher temporal resolution, where we're issuing forecasts for just a short period of time. We're issuing, here's the probabilistic chance, here's the chance of a tornado in this area over the next 3 hours. And so we're moving in that direction as well, experimentally at first.
What's your forecast? What's the probability you guys will go to a numeric scale?
In those forecasts, in the 3-hour ones?
No, outlook.
Oh, in the outlook?
Changing the verbiage of low, moderate, high, enhanced, marginal. What's the probability you're going to go to a numeric scale only?
Oh, numeric only.
Yeah, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
That's kind of a joke. I'm just being.
Well, I wouldn't rule that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
SPC seems to be huge on probabilities. 80% probability of issuing the probability of a watch, and I mean, I could see Greg, you doing that with dinner. The 40% chance of probability of going to this restaurant versus. I mean, is that how you're always thinking anymore?
Yeah, my wife hates that, right? You have to think about it that way, really. Especially in the age of ensembles, right? Ensembles, I think, are as revolutionary to meteorology as radar and satellite. They give us, as meteorologists, insight into atmospheric predictability. I've been around long enough that I remember back to the days where we really just had one model, right? We had one model that was providing us the forecast. We couldn't wait for the 72-hour 500 millibar chart to print out. And that was our forecast. That was the 3-day forecast from one model. Well, now we've got the global ensemble systems with 50 models. So now we have 50 500 millibar charts to choose from, all valid 3 days from now. And some would say that that's just a mess. But what it allows us to do is look at consistency across all of those forecasts in a probability sense. And it allows us to see whether there's a lot of agreement among all those models or whether there's a lot of disagreement. And simply put, a lot of disagreement means that the atmosphere is in a state that is highly unpredictable. A lot of agreement would mean that the atmosphere is in a state that is relatively more predictable, or we could have better confidence in our forecasts. And so ensemble systems give us insight into predictability in a way that we've really never had before. And I consider them quite revolutionary in how we go about forecasting. But the only way we can use them is in a probability sense. You've got 100 models, 25 of them agree that it's going to be freezing rain in Oklahoma City. That's a 25% simple probability, right? And so that's how we need to convey that forecast in a way that makes some sense. That the atmosphere is like rolling the dice, and sometimes we can call it. Sometimes those dice are loaded, and sometimes there's too many dice to even keep track of.
That is very true. That is very true. Hey guys, y'all want to add anything last minute before we let Greg go? Shelby, Jonathan, Brad.
I heard what I need to hear.
Well, I am anxious to see what happens at the area hospitals in the coming days. See if this high pressure means anything. See if there's an increase in childbirths. If you don't see me on air for a couple days, then...
See, Damon, I was struggling with this because higher pressure would make lower internal pressure, right? Wouldn't you be more concerned about low pressure coming?
Well, according to the National Center of Medicine, they said it didn't matter whether it was an increase or decrease in pressure. So...
All right.
I don't have my MD, so I'm just going to have to go off of what the National Center of Medicine says.
That's an interesting one, that there isn't a consistent, signal regarding pressure. Maybe it's a temperature change or something too. Who knows?
Or we're just looking way too hard.
Greg, I'm pretty sure that there's going to be an email sent to y'all at some point that says y'all need to start doing a childbirth outlook. It'll be widely popular, I bet.
Uh-huh.
No, I think it is interesting, Damon. Let's see, your baby is born due in February, right? So if you go back 9 months, that would be May. So May was pretty quiet. What
May
did you do with
15th
your
was
free time?
a very quiet day. It was very quiet. And I am not the only meteorologist, I want to say, that's dealing with this. I was actually supposed to speak at a weather conference this month in Steamboat, and I had to pull myself out, as well as another meteorologist who was supposed to go as well. Both of us are expecting at the end of the month. So, yeah, this is what happens, Greg, when we have a quiet 2014. Meteorologists spend a little bit too much time at home.
That's the way it goes.